on the German PAL European format. We just sent it right to you, so we're watching it as you are right now.
And you see that plume of black smoke that followed this plane. Eyewitnesses had told us earlier in the day that they heard and sensed there was some sort of explosion. There it is. There you see that plane literally go into the waters off of South Beach in Miami Beach near that just shortly after it took off. We don't know how high the plane actually got, what kind of altitude, but then it goes down very, very rapidly, followed by a ball of fire and that extensive black smoke. Bob Francis is on the phone with us now. He's the former vice chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. I assume, Bob, you can see your television, you can see CNN.
Yes,
you see the same video that we've just seen.
That's truly remarkable, a remarkable piece of film. And it's going to be enormously valuable to the investigators. It looks like a non-flaming. I can't quite see because there's something in front here, but there's part of the airplane that went in first. Looks, almost like the totality of the airplane, but then you have this very large flaming piece coming in afterward. What that means, somebody will have to determine, but it looks like something happened very quickly. And, we've heard from one of the witnesses that they heard an explosion. So maybe that's a little more credible in my mind than it was when I first heard that. But
they will slow this down every frame. They will scrutinize to try to determine what happened. Could you tell, and we're going to try to slow it down ourselves, Bob, could you tell if both wings were intact when that plane landed or hit the water?
I could not. What would be very helpful, Wolf, is if they could stop it when you're seeing both what looks like the main part of the aircraft not on fire, and then the piece that clearly was on fire and smoking coming in afterward.
We're going to do that.
Right there.
We'll try to freeze it. You see that? There it is. You can see it right there. You see the plane. We've stopped the video, and right behind it looks like another piece of equipment, maybe an engine, maybe a piece of the wing, maybe something else, but it's clearly on fire, and all of that smoke that's coming in the tail, in the aftermath of this crash, is coming from that whatever that is. Do you have any sense what that is, Bob?
It just, again, this is my quick analysis, and these people at the NTSB are very, very good at this analysis. But that somebody just cleared the picture up a little bit. But I would say that they will be able to look at the part of the aircraft that's close to the water, not flaming, and see what's missing. I mean, it would look like it has to be a fairly substantial piece of equipment, whether it's an engine or whether it's a wing with fuel burning or what. It's not just a little something that which is burning, and that obviously will be enormously valuable. I mean, these are turboprop engines, as I understand the PT6. It's a Pratt & Whitney engine, very, very widely used in commuter airlines and general aviation airplanes. Very, very reliable engine.
The engines, there are two turboprops right on top of the wings, and it looks potentially that maybe one of those engines simply was blown off or whatever and was on flame, was burning as that plane went down.
I think that's a pretty potentially possible interpretation. It's the angle that you see the fuselage of the aircraft with the tail and presumably the left wing. It looks like it has an engine on that wing. Now, you can't really see the other side, and it's hard to be sure which side it is. But I just can't overstate the value that piece of film will be to the NTSB.
This is very extraordinary in these kinds of crashes to actually get a videotape of the plane crashing, isn't it?
It is, and particularly, sometimes there'll be very little faded pieces that somebody will get. but this is pretty clear. And when they use a computer to improve the resolution of the photo, it's going to be very, very helpful, I think.
The next step in this is to do what? And let me just remind our viewers what we're seeing. There were 20 people on board this Chalks Ocean Airways flight leaving Miami for Bimini in the Bahamas. It had just taken off. It was getting some altitude when all of a sudden, and we have no idea why, the plane simply started to go down, and it was followed by a ball of fire, some sort of piece of that plane, it looks like, following the plane. The plane hits the water, 20 people on board. They've recovered 19 bodies, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, which has been in charge of the search and rescue operation. And then shortly, a split second, literally, after the plane goes into the water, that subsequent piece of debris on fire and all that black smoke coming from that, whether it's an engine or part of the wing or another part of the plane, whatever it is, hits the water as well. And it's a pretty amazing piece of video, but it's so heartbreaking to think, Bob, that there are 20 people on board that plane as it goes into the water.
Absolutely. I mean, whenever we're dealing with these kinds of things, the magnitude of the tragedy is enormous. But I would say that in terms of the investigative process, I believe that this piece of film will now allow the NTSB to prioritize a little bit what they're looking for in terms of the wreckage, so that if it isn't very deep there, and it probably isn't, they will be able to tell the divers, whoever the divers are, we really want you to look for the engines, or we want to look for a wing or whatever it is, and don't worry about something else.
We're going to replay, Bob, this videotape, and we're going to cue it up to the beginning once we see this. We're going to take a quick break, though. We're going to show our viewers precisely what we have on this videotape, a heartbreaking story that we've been covering. We'll also continue on with the day's other news, including my one-on-one interview with the Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice. I'll ask her some of the tough questions on why the president authorized secret wiretapping, eavesdropping on American citizens and others in the aftermath of 9/11 without going to court and getting those court warrants. We'll be right back.
I know you deceived me, now here's a surprise. I know that you have, 'cause there's magic in my eyes. I can see for miles and miles. I can see for miles and
Silver Star, high-performance headlights from Sylvania. See the world in a new light.
When it comes to bad cholesterol, has your doctor told you lower is better? Because of recent medical information, your doctor may recommend an even lower cholesterol goal than before.
Going down.
So you've changed your diet. You exercise. But what if you still need a cholesterol medicine? Well, one that can lower bad cholesterol up to 52% is Crestor. Yes, Crestor, along with diet, can lower that cholesterol up to 52%. Is Crestor right for you? That's between you and your doctor. Crestor is not for everyone, including people with liver disease and women who are nursing, pregnant, or may become pregnant. Simple blood tests are needed to check for liver problems. Tell your doctor about other medications you're taking, or if you experience muscle pain or weakness, as they may be a sign of serious side effects. Is your cholesterol really where it needs to be? Ask your doctor about Crestor.
Is this a help desk?
Yes.
We need some help.
With what?
It's our prototype?
Forget prototypes.
How do we test our new design?
Virtual simulations, on-demand supercomputing.
We're a small company. That sounds expensive.
It's not. That's expensive.
Yeah, that is expensive. Hey, can we get a ride somewhere?
Have you been in an accident of any kind? Any stalling, sputtering, that kind of thing?
Don't buy a used car without a Carfax history report. Now with the buyback guarantee. For details, ask your dealer or go to Carfax.com.
My interview with the Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice coming up. First, we want to show you that videotape, amateur video that we've just received here at CNN. Tourists took this video of this small seaplane that went down off the coast of South Beach in Miami Beach. There you see it. It's a Chalk Ocean Airways plane with 20 people on board. 19 bodies have been recovered. Bob Francis, the former vice chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, is on the phone with us. He's been watching this amazing, amazing video. The plane goes in, and then some other piece of equipment, maybe an engine, maybe part of a wing, on fire, followed by a trail of black smoke, hits the water right after the plane hits the water with those 20 people inside. You've been trying to digest this, Bob. Give our viewers a sense of what we have just seen.
Well, we've seen a remarkable coverage of an accident taking place, and something which, as I've said, is going to be enormously valuable to the NTSB and the investigators. I can't remember, there are times when we've had film like this before, but not very often. And when you have it, it's very helpful.
The last time I remember seeing a plane crash like that, some sort of acrobatic aircraft or a stunt plane, usually you see that, but a passenger plane, even a small one like this with 20 people on board, to see that crash like that, followed by something on fire with a trail of smoke, is pretty amazing.
Well, the Concorde accident, Wolf, in Paris, there was some very good film of that, and again, enormously helpful to the investigators.
Bob, we're going to continue to assess this videotape, slow it down, get some more analysis. Stay with us, because we'll come back to it. Jackie Schechner, our internet reporter, is getting some additional information online. What are you getting, Jackie?
Well, if we cross-checked our research with the NTSB, and what we found out is this is the first Chalk Ocean Airways flight to go down with passengers. But there was actually 2 fatalities in an incident of March 1994. What we found out is that plane went down in Key West. It was trying to refuel, then took off, rolled left, and crashed nose down into the water. 2 pilots were killed. That was due to a supposed water leak. They hadn't cross-checked the water on that plane, Wolf.
All right, Jackie, thank you very much. And we'll continue to monitor this videotape, get all the latest information for it. We'll come back here in the situation to this story. But the other important story we've been following all day, President Bush. He's not alone today in defending his approval of domestic spying on terrorist suspects without a warrant. The Secretary of State of the United States, Condoleezza Rice, also is front and center, taking questions about the program and the president's power to authorize it. I went over to the State Department earlier today. I spoke with the Secretary of State at length about this earlier today. Madam Secretary, thanks very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Wolf.
You were the National Security Advisor right after 9/11 when the President authorized this extraordinary decision to go ahead with surveillance, eavesdropping on Americans and others, making international phone calls or faxes or emails without getting court orders. How did that decision come about?
The President, first of all, let's talk about what he authorized. He authorized the National Security Agency to collect information on a limited number of people with ties to al-Qaeda in order to be able to close the gap, the seam between the domestic territory of the United States and foreign territory. One of the clear findings of the 9/11 Commission was that our intelligence agencies were looking outward, our law enforcement agencies were looking inward, and a gap had developed. We didn't know the connection between what people with terrorist ties inside the United States were doing to what people who were terrorists or might be planning terrorist operations outside the country were doing. And so the President made that decision. He did it on the basis of his constitutional authority under Article 2 and other statutory authorities. I think the Attorney General spoke to those legal issues earlier, and he did it to protect the country because these days, after September 11th, we recognized, and he recognized as the one with real responsibility for protecting the country, that if you let people commit the crime, then thousands of people die. So you have to detect it before it happens.
But there was a mechanism, still is a mechanism, that's been in place since 1978, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA court, to go ahead and get this kind of authority with a court warrant. Why not use that?
Well, first of all, the FISA Act, as you said, 1978, very different circumstances imagined at the time. FISA has been principally for longer-term monitoring. It's been capable of helping us when we've been principally concerned with the activities of people who might be acting on behalf of a foreign government. You can imagine that those are often longer-term matters. But the kind of agility that is needed in order to detect rather than to monitor, as the President talked about today, the President needed to draw on these other authorities, and he has.
But even within the FISA Act, there are extraordinary circumstances that would allow the wiretap, the surveillance to begin, and then within 72 hours, you could still go and get the warrant.
Well, let's just say that these people, these networks, these shadowy networks, which are not associated with countries, they're stateless, not stable targets, are pretty agile themselves. And so in order to give our intelligence agencies the kind of agility that they need in order to detect Wolf, and I want to say once again, the President has a constitutional responsibility to protect the country. That means physically. It also means to protect the civil liberties of Americans under the constitutions. And he, of course, has both responsibilities and takes both very seriously. And so that's why this was done with thorough levels of review. It has to be reauthorized every 45 days. It was briefed to Congress numerous times, or to relevant congressional officials numerous times. And so the President and his advisors thought this the best way to give him the ability as under his responsibilities as Commander-in-Chief to defend the country.
Because you know the history, you're a student of history, you know the history of the abuses of this kind of domestic spying going back to the 60s and 70s. And when the Supreme Court made a decision, it was 9-0, 1972, United States versus U.S. District Court, Lewis Powell, the justice, wrote this: "Security surveillances are especially sensitive because of the inherent vagueness of the domestic security concept, the necessarily broad and continuing nature of intelligence gathering, and the temptation to utilize such surveillances to oversee political dissent." You remember the spying on Dr. Martin Luther King
I do,
and other Americans who were opposed to the war in Vietnam, and national security considerations were then justified for that kind of surveillance. And then Powell went on to say that the Fourth Amendment protects Americans, and let me read specifically from what he wrote, 9-0 decision, "from unreasonable searches and seizures, and freedom cannot be," and then he said, "and that freedom cannot be properly guaranteed if domestic security surveillances are conducted solely at the discretion of the executive branch."
Well, first of all, the President is more than aware of the civil liberties concerns, and that is why this has been structured in such a very limited and controlled way, with multiple layers of oversight, with lawyers of justice and of the National Security Agency overseeing it, briefings to Congress. It's also why, as the Attorney General spoke to earlier, the President is drawing on existing authorities under the Constitution, under statute. We also have to note, Wolf, that it is limited in scope, limited to people who are associated with or with ties to Al-Qaeda.
How do you know these people are associated with Al-Qaeda?
Well, I'm not going to get into the program, but let's just remember that in 2001, we experienced what it meant to not know what conversations were going on inside the country that were connecting to terrorist plotting outside the country. We learned what that produced, and it produced the kind of devastation that we had on September the 11th. And so the President has an obligation to try and close that seam, and that is what he's done with this program.
When you were the National Security Advisor, did you ever say, well, maybe we should go seek new legislation, get some new authority, go to the courts, and make sure this is done so that there would be no question whatsoever that this was done properly?
Well, this was a carefully and very deliberately considered issue for the President of how best to fulfill his responsibilities to protect the country and how best to do it legally within his constitutional and legal authorities.
Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, said last night, "If the courts should have been involved, I want them involved because you're at war. It doesn't justify doing away with the process that keeps you free." which is a statement that sort of underscores, like Senator Specter, Republican, and others, that they want to hear more justification for this because they're not yet convinced that the legal authority, as you cite in the Constitution, Article 2, or the legislation passed right after 9/11 justifying use of force in Afghanistan.
The president spoke to this earlier, and the attorney general, who is, after all, the highest legal authority in the country, has spoken to this. I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you that from a policy perspective, the problem that had to be solved and that must remain solved is to be able to protect this country by detecting terrorist plots before they materialize. If in this case, this is not criminal activity where you let the criminal commit the crime and then you investigate after the fact. This is not trying to understand the activities of people who might be working on behalf of foreign governments. This is trying to detect in a very rapid fashion plots against this country by not having the territory of the United States as a safe haven for conversations between people with terrorist ties here and with terrorists outside the country.
This is an extremely sensitive national security issue. It doesn't get much more sensitive than this. As a result, I'm confused why the president decided to publicly acknowledge it.
Well, I think the president felt that after this very damaging leak, and frankly, it's a very sad day when the United States reveals to the people that we are trying to follow, trying to track, trying to disrupt how we're doing it, and anything about how we're doing it. Wolf's president cited earlier, we had a beat on Osama bin Laden's phone at one point too, and when an article appeared saying that, he stopped using it from all that we can tell. So it is a danger to the country when there are leaks of this sort. But the president felt that given this, he needed to explain it to the American people without exposing the details of the program. And there have to be limitations in order not to expose the details of the program. But that he needed to explain that he was using his constitutional authority to protect the country in order to detect these plots, but also to protect their civil liberties.
The Secretary of State speaking with me earlier today over at the State Department. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get a different perspective on what the president has authorized. The famed Harvard law professor, Alan Dershowitz, standing by. He's got a different take than the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the president. We'll hear from Alan Dershowitz right after this.
Anderson Cooper, your eyes, your ears, your connection. AC 360, CNN Tonight, 10 Eastern.
Get the bonus extra feature, Movies That Pop. Get more than just a movie when you order Batman Begins. Watch to find out how they did it and why. With up to 15 minutes of enhanced footage, filled with behind-the-scenes information and movie trivia. Get Movies That Pop. Order Batman Begins. Now available from DirecTV Pay-Per-View Movies.
Now on pay-per-view.
It's Bewitched. We're redoing it.
He was looking for the perfect witch.
Sorry. Wiggle your nose.
But what he got was the real thing.
When he finds out about you.
He won't care. Guess what? I'm a witch.
Nicole Kidman, Will Ferrell.
Trick or treat!
Bewitched. Now available on pay-per-view.
Get more out of your DirecTV. Like $50 credits on your bill when you spread the word and refer your friends. Watching 6 channels at once with mixed channels. Even free installation when you move with DirecTV Movers Connection. Check out all the sweet perks of being a customer only at directv.com/benefits.
From Ridley Scott, the director of Gladiator. Protect the defenseless.
Whatever you ask, I will serve.
Brings us the story.
Give me a war
that changed the world forever.
Whoever dies here today, he will certainly be among them.
Now, the crusade for a kingdom begins. kingdom of heaven.
The Bushes, Martha, Seinfeld, Barbara Walters, and more. Larry's King Size Christmas. CNN all day.
We just heard the Secretary of State defend the president's decision to go ahead with secret wiretaps of Americans and others without court orders. Let's get a different perspective. The Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz is joining us. He's the author of the book, The Case for Peace, and he's got a new book coming out next month entitled Preemption, precisely on this topic. What do you believe? Does the president have the authority to go ahead and engage in this surveillance without getting court orders?
Not under current law. And I think what the president is doing is playing Supreme Court roulette. He knows he's going to have a new Supreme Court. A new Chief Justice is already in place, a new nominee. And he's hoping that the new Supreme Court will have a different approach from the one in the 1970s. The Supreme Court has been consistent since the 1950s in requiring a warrant for wiretaps involving American citizens and taking place in the United States. And what's worse is the president doesn't need this authority. FISA gives him everything he needs. It's rare that a wiretap request gets turned down. If Secretary Rice is right that there are these connections, all they have to do is go to a secret judge in the Justice Department, either before the fact or, if necessary, after the fact, and get a warrant. The difference is a warrant requires that you keep a record, and there's accountability, and there can be hearings afterward, whereas under this procedure, nobody will ever know who was wiretapped, and he's requiring us to trust that it will be never used politically.
The president and his legal advisors say they've gone through all the laws. They cite the Article 2 of the Constitution as commander-in-chief. They also cite the law that was passed right after 9/11 on September 14th. The president is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or abided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States. Those are the two legal justifications he cited.
Well, the Supreme Court of the United States just last year reminded the president that he is not commander-in-chief of the United States. He's commander-in-chief of the armed forces, that the United States civilian citizens are not under his control as commander-in-chief. And if he thinks that Congress authorized this, why didn't he go to Congress and specifically say, let's be precise? Why is he so concerned about hearings now? Why not ask Congress whether they intended to authorize this kind of wiretapping and surveillance on American citizens? The reason is because I think this administration knows Congress never had in mind to change the existing law, and Congress may not even have the authority. It may be constitutional.
They did at least a dozen times notify the Democratic and Republican leadership in the Congress and the chairman and the vice chairman of the intelligence committees.
That's right, and told them they couldn't even tell their staff members about it. It was so secret and confidential, and we now have a letter from one of those senators out there saying, I was always in a very awkward position. I couldn't tell my staff about it. I couldn't communicate about it with other people, and I never approved of it. It's very, very difficult for senators simply being notified of something that's so confidential, and now we're hearing the secretary complaining about the New York Times performing its check and function under the First Amendment to the Constitution, being criticized for revealing this.
Did the president break the law?
I think the president broke the law. I think that Congress should have hearings. I think experts should be called in on the right, on the left, in the center, constitutional law scholars, criminal law scholars, and asked for an independent evaluation. It's not enough for the president to get his lawyers to tell him what he wants to hear. That's not the kind of objective legal advice that the Constitution requires for this kind of action to be undertaken. This is very, very serious, and it's the beginning of a process, and I think it will have to end with congressional hearings and inquiry into the power of the president, and this should not be resisted. This is required under our check and balance function.
All right, Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard Law professor, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
The debate, no doubt, will continue. Up next, might Saddam Hussein still have been on the run? A new report says he had a foolproof plan to evade capture. That's until he says someone betrayed him. Mary Snow's got the story. Stay with us.
Roger.
As a kid, I used technology to help people do better. Today, Scottrade does the same for online investors. If you've been thinking about moving your account, this is the perfect time to come to Scottrade. With powerful trading tools and fast, accurate $7 trades, Scottrade gives you more for your money.
No Venetian blinds. That's why Geico.com is so simple. Or is it because you can get help if you need it and get a free rate quote in minutes? 15 minutes could save you 15% on car insurance. Simple as that.
What would you ask an oil company?
Do you think that oil is never going to run out? Or is it a resource that will be depleted? And then what's next? What is the future for that in the next, I don't know how many years, but what are our kids going to be driving on? Exactly.
Around the World is sponsored by BP. Log on to cnn.com/Situation Room for more on these stories from around the world.
Looking at news around the world, it turns out Saddam Hussein apparently had an escape plan when he was captured by U.S. troops 2 years ago. Let's go to New York. Mary Snow's got some new details. Mary?
Well, Wolf, it does seem that Saddam Hussein had a very different plan in the works the day he was taken into custody. December 13th, 2003. His attorney says Saddam Hussein expected to find a motorcycle when he emerged from an underground hole. Instead, his escape plan went bust, and he was taken into U.S. custody.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Saddam Hussein says he believes betrayal did him in. That's according to Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General who now represents the ousted Iraqi leader at his trial. He says Hussein believed he would be a fugitive indefinitely.
He said he'd been moving from place to place to encourage people to resist the occupation. He'd been at this particular place several times. He saw soldiers outside. That's when he went through the trap door into the tunnel.
U.S. military officials describe it as a spider hole. According to Clark, Hussein told him he lost consciousness in the hole and believes he was gassed. The details emerge when Clark says he recently asked the former Iraqi leader about his capture during a break at the trial.
Did you ask him how he moved around?
I think he moved in different ways. I think he moved on bicycles. I think he moved in groups in a wagon. I think he perhaps used taxi cabs.
When U.S. forces captured Hussein, they reported a taxi cab was outside his hiding spot.
Would he travel alone?
Rarely.
How many people would travel with him?
It'd vary. 5 or 6 would be maximum. Probably 2 or 3 would be more normal.
Do you think he's telling you the truth?
Yeah. No reason why he wouldn't be. I mean, why make up something like that?
When asked about Saddam Hussein's claim that he was gassed, a Pentagon spokesman said it's the first time he had heard of such a claim, but says he doubted it was true. The spokesman also said he would look into it further. Wolf?
All right, Mary, good story. Thanks very much. Mary Snow reporting. When we come back, Jack Cafferty has your email on the spying bombshell. Stay with us.
Happy holidays, Miss Earl.
Angie, thank you. I have something for you, too. Be a dear and take this to the post office.
Happy holidays, Doug.
You're a lifesaver.
Yo, Angie!
Holiday packages to send.
Thank you.
Go to USPS.com, pay postage, print labels, and ask for a pickup. Free carrier pickup only from the U.S. Postal Service.
Hey, Angie, you got any more cookies?
You know, sir, this year we can use the easy button to get all the digital cameras we need.
Megapixels.
Do it.
Use your Easy Button. This week at Staples, get a free Epson all-in-one when you buy a Kodak EasyShare CD43 system after mail-in rebate. Staples, that was easy.
You can be a very knowledgeable pharmacist, but if you don't have good people skills, I care if somebody's sick or if somebody's hurting because they've lost a loved one. I want them to feel at home at my pharmacy. I want them to feel that they can rely on me. That's important to me. It's not about how much money I make or am I going to do better than someone else. It's not about that at all. It's about who you're going to save. My name is Melva McGinnis. I'm a CVS pharmacist.
Holiday greetings from Budweiser. From our family to yours, we wish you a very safe and happy holiday season.
Imagine you take your Samsung camcorder on the company cruise. The next day, you use your MP3 player to show the boss some of the party's special moments. You get a corner office. You show the CEO the colors, the sound. He puts you in charge of the Mediterranean. Then one day, the chairman says, I hope you bring that camcorder to the holiday party. And you say, I'd be delighted. With Samsung design and technology, it's not that hard to imagine.
Let's go right to New York and Jack Cafferty with your email. Jack?
Was it wrong for the New York Times to publish the eavesdropping story? John in Barberton, Ohio. If the Times was wrong about anything, it was sitting on the story for a year. Please stop calling this eavesdropping. That's what I do at the restaurant when the couple in the next booth is discussing their spouses. What the president authorized is a treasonous violation of the Fourth Amendment. Mike writes, I'd be outraged if my government after 9/11 did not implement exactly this type of intelligence operation. By its very nature, it must remain secret. As long as carefully implemented and with congressional oversight, I see no problem, except with those who now want to turn it into a political football. Josh writes in Washington, D.C., it's poor journalism to release classified information that threatens our national security. However, it's also a journalist's responsibility to report news that's valuable to the American people. The Times felt there were constitutional laws being broken, and the story was reported. If true, this is exactly what a reporter should do. Whether or not laws were broken remains to be seen. Doug in San Diego, I'm sure today's terrorists are sophisticated enough to know eavesdropping is taking place. The Times' release of the information was only a revelation to us non-sophisticates who blindly think our leaders are altruistic patriots who are only bent on doing good deeds.
All right, Jack, thanks very much. I'll see you here tomorrow in the Situation Room. We're on the air weekdays, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Paula's on standing by to pick up our coverage. Paula?